Week 10 of the fantasy football season. Here's tight end starts sit every matchup this week. First matchup, Vegas Raiders at the Denver Broncos. Brock Bowers must start. Came back last week with a game. It was for him 12 catches, 127 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So Bowers, he was the first tight end off the board in most fantasy leagues going into the season. And that Bowers missed multiple weeks with a knee injury, but last week looked 100% healthy, running his routes, making plays. And this week, even in a tough matchup, he's a start. Evan Ingram, a sit. He really hasn't been part of this offense much all season long as Evan Ingram. In the tight end position, the last couple of weeks, a lot of guys have emerged. And Evan Ingram weekly is a tight end falling down the rankings. So last week, after he didn't score anything with a goose egg in a matchup at the Texans, he's a sit. Atlanta Falcons at the Indianapolis Colts, Kyle Pitts a start. Kyle Pitts last week, a mediocre game. It was for him 7.8 fantasy points. He's the number 3 option in this offense behind Bijan Robinson, behind Drake London. Then you got Kyle Pitts. And Kyle Pitts, he can run the routes. We know he's a matchup problem. It just hasn't come all together for him in his NFL career. But this week, in a decent matchup where they could be chasing points in Indianapolis, he's a start. Tyler Warren a start. Last couple of weeks, the numbers have dropped down for Tyler Warren, and teams are starting to look at film and pay more focus to Tyler Warren. So now in his rookie year, we have to see some adjustments Tyler Warren has to make. But I still think it's just a couple bad games in a row. This offense last week couldn't get in sync until garbage time. They started making plays. But this week in a great matchup and back home versus Atlanta, Tyler Warren still one of the better tight ends in fantasy football in a start. Cleveland Browns at the New York Jets. David Njoku, as of now, still on the roster with this Cleveland Brown team, even though there's a good possibility he could be traded later today at the NFL trade deadline. But this week at the Jets, he's a start. Is David Njoku and Harold Fanning Jr. a start as well, where the tight end position is the only position really targeted here by Dylan Gabriel in this offense. So this week in a matchup at the Jets where their defense is in trouble all season long, they're both starts. Mason Taylor is sit. Mason Taylor, arguably the number 2 option in this passing game for this New York Jet team, obviously behind Garrett Wilson in this offense. But Mason Taylor, he's going to have some growing pains. He's only in his rookie season. We've seen a couple good games out of him, but consistency hasn't been a key. So he's a sit this week. New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. 3 weeks in a row now, Juwan Johnson has had double-digit fantasy points. Last week he found the end zone at that game at the Los Angeles Rams. And with the rookie Tyler Show in there, quarterback, obviously a young quarterback's best friend and security blanket is the tight end position. So this week in a decent matchup at the Panthers, he's a start. Jatavian Sanders a sit. This tight end position for many seasons really hasn't done much over there in Carolina since the Greg Olsen days. So Sanders, he was a good prospect coming out a couple seasons ago, but we really haven't seen it translate to the field. A couple decent games here and there, but never really having fantasy value. So he's a sit even in a good matchup. New England Patriots at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Hunter Henry, he was slumping for a little bit, but last week he came back with a decent game, 4 catches, 51 yards versus the Atlanta Falcons. But I think there's better options now throughout the league at the tight end position where players have been more consistent than Hunter Henry over the last few weeks. And Henry, to me, he's a back-end fringe option even after coming off a decent game. Cade Otton to start, arguably number 2 option in this passing game. If once again we're going to see Chris Godwin be out, and we know Mike Evans, he's going to be out multiple weeks with the collarbone injury. So Cade Otton, big 6'7", 6'8" target, big red zone threat. And him and Baker Mayfield definitely worked on rapport over the last few weeks. So this week in an okay matchup with the Patriots coming in, he's a start. Baltimore Ravens at the Minnesota Vikings. Mark Andrews, it was a limited game for him, but he did find the end zone twice on 2 catches in last week's ball game at the Miami Dolphins. And Andrews, we know, touchdown guy, where yards aren't going to be there more weeks than not. But last season, same type of thing, got off to a slow start and still finished the season with 11 touchdowns. So this week in Minnesota, where Sam Laporta just came off 90-plus yards and a touchdown, I got Andrews as a start. TJ Hawkinson, a fringe option last week. A touchdown saved Hawkinson's day where he still failed to get double-digit fantasy points. And Hawkinson, maybe his best years are behind him, and coming off an ACL injury a few seasons ago doesn't help as well. And also playing with guys like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Mason and Jones in the backfield. He, at times, is the 5th option in this offense. So with all those factors and not much of an upside with the youngster J.J. McCarthy in there, he's a fringe option. Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. And Katie had a oblique injury in Week 6 Atlanta. He didn't play in that game. Week 7 was bye. Then Week 8 at Carolina did nothing. And then Week 9 versus the Chiefs, a monster game, 6 catches, 101 yards, and a touchdown. So this week, a great matchup at the Miami Dolphins, a defense that can't stop anyone. We just saw Mark Andrews go out there and score 2 touchdowns. And arguably, Kincaid, more weeks than not, could be the number one option in this passing game for the Buffalo Bills. Greg Dulcich, he's a sit in this one. Dulcich last week, he made a few plays for this Dolphin team. We know Darren Waller, he's out a few more games where he's injured once again is Waller. And health's always been a problem for Darren Waller, even coming out of retirement for a season. He was hurt the beginning of the season, and he's been hurt the last couple weeks. So Dulcich, he was a highly touted tight end with the Broncos, but it never worked out there. And here with the Dolphins, we'll see if he could get things going, but he's not a fantasy option. New York Giants at the Chicago Bears. Theo Johnson's been a touchdown-dependent tight end this season. Last week, he found the end zone once again, but if he's not scoring those touchdowns, because his yards per game really aren't that great, where he is the third option in this offense, in my opinion, behind Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. So this week in the matchup at the Bears, where they do give up points, they do give up yards, I think Johnson could go out there and be a backup fringe option with not a high ceiling. Colston Loveland, a start. Last week, a monster game, and finally a breakout game for a top 10 pick in the NFL draft for Loveland, where he even went over Tyler Warren in the NFL draft. So Loveland, a big 58-yard touchdown with under a minute left to put it on ice and win the ball game for the Chicago Bears. So Loveland over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns last week. Cole Kmet got a concussion. It's not going to look good, I think, going into this game he's going to play. And this week's a great matchup versus the New York Giants. So Loveland is a start, and maybe it could be like a Rondé Gatson, where it took that one big game, and then from that, he just takes off, and he's a fantasy option the remainder of the season. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans. Hunter Long a sit. The tight end room's pretty much been non-existent catching the football since Brenton Strange has been out with injury for this Jacksonville Jaguar team. And this week as well, a tougher matchup at the Houston Texans. He's a sit. Dalton Schultz, a fringe option. He's the number 2 option, in my opinion, in the passing game for this Houston Texan team. Last week, a good game for Schultz, 6 catches, 77 yards. And we know what Schultz is capable of. We saw with the Dallas Cowboys for a few seasons. He had good years. He had an okay season with the Texans early on when he signed with them. And this week in a good matchup versus a Jaguar defense that just got torched by Brock Bowers for 127 yards and 3 touchdowns. Schultz is a fringe option to me. Arizona Cardinals at the Seattle Seahawks. Trey McBride, he's a start each and every week. One of the best tight ends, obviously, in all pro football and fantasy football over the last few months. And on Monday Night Football, once again, he found the end zone. Him and Brissett have a good rapport, and his numbers have been way better with Brissett in the lineup over the last few weeks. So we'll see if Kyler Murray plays in the next week's game with the foot injury. But like I said, this whole offense as a whole has been operating well in Arizona, where they're putting points on the board and moving the football down the field. Just blowing games late have been a problem for them, even though in Week 9 they held on and dominated that ball game at the Dallas Cowboys. A.J. Bonner, a sit. Last week he had a touchdown as Bonner, but he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end pretty much all season long, where he had a 1-yard rush for a touchdown. A.J. Bonner just pushing the pile. So Bonner, him and Darnold definitely have good rapport. He's definitely been a red zone and an end zone threat is A.J. Bonner. But like I said, tight ends have moved up over the last couple weeks. And Bonner, if he's not scoring a touchdown, his numbers have pretty much been non-existent. Next matchup, Detroit Lions at the Washington Commanders. Sam Laporta is starting. Laporta, he's starting to get things going over the last month of the season, where he's had some big ball games and a couple down games. But in this offense, some weeks it's going to be St. Brown having the monster game, and it looks like some weeks it's going to be Laporta. So last week a big game it was for Laporta, 97 yards, finding the end zone. This week a great matchup at the Commanders, where their defense can't stop anyone, and now with Lattimore possibly tearing the ACL is a big hit in that secondary as well. And we saw last week A.J. Bonner and also Elijah Arroyo, both tight ends over there in Seattle, scored touchdowns in this game. So Sam Laporta, he's a lock, didn't start. Zach Ertz, a fringe option now. Marcus Mariota in there, quarterback. And we know this receiving room's decimated. Terry McLaurin, we don't know if he's going to come back from injury. Luke McCaffrey, he's out now, broke his collarbone in the Week 9 loss versus Seattle Seahawks. But Zach Ertz, he'll get his few catches here and there, but another tight end where I don't think his ceiling's high. Another tight ends over the last few weeks have passed him in terms of rankings in fantasy football, so he's a fringe option. Los Angeles Rams at the Niners. Tyler Higbee a sit. I know he found the end zone last week. I know there's a possibility Puka Nacua could be out in this ball game as well, where there could be more targets going around, obviously, in this offense for this Ram team. But Tyler Higbee's been a touchdown-dependent tight end now for many seasons. And this week at San Francisco, there's better options. He's a sit. George Kittle, a start. Kittle, 2 out of 3 games since he returned to the lineup. We haven't seen much from George Kittle. But in these division games, and especially at home, is where he rises to the occasion. So this week versus the Rams, I think George Kittle could go out there. A team he's got a good track record against, obviously playing all these games in the NFC West. He's a start. Sunday night, Pittsburgh Steelers at the Chargers. Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, the sits. Pat Freiermuth definitely has been a guy who's on the radar a little bit over the last few weeks, but he's a touchdown-dependent tight end as well. Besides the one big game on Thursday night a few weeks ago in Week 7 at the Cincinnati Bengals, Pat Freiermuth's pretty much been non-existent for fantasy football. And Jonnu Smith as well, if he's not scoring a touchdown, he's been non-existent. And that's the thing with Aaron Rodgers. He don't really target the tight end position going back many seasons, even to his Green Bay Packer days. And Rondé Gatson to start. He's been one of the better tight ends in all fantasy football over the last month. And he's arguably the number 2 option now in this passing game to me. Behind Ladd McConkey is Gatson. He's a matchup problem. He can run the routes. He can make guys miss. He could get open if it's a linebacker, safety, whoever's going to be on him. And he's got the strength and the height ability. So this week in a matchup, even versus a good defense of the Steelers, he's a start. And Monday night, Philadelphia Eagles at the Green Bay Packers, Dallas Goedert. It's been a great season for him. Arguably, he's been the number 1 option in this passing game, and definitely the most consistent option so far this season in the passing game is Dallas Goedert. So he's a matchup problem, great route runner, good hands, and him and Jalen Hurts have been locked in all season long, so he's a start. And Luke Musgrave is going to fill in now for Tucker Kraft, who's out for the season after tearing the ACL. So Musgrave, he was a highly touted draft pick a few seasons ago going in the second round, but obviously Tucker Kraft jumped him on the depth chart and never looked back. But now Musgrave's going to get an opportunity, at least for the rest of this season, with the injury to Kraft out for the year. But this week, like I said, a lot of tight ends have emerged over the last few weeks, and we haven't seen much from Musgrave. So he's a sit this week. So that's tight end start, sit every matchup for Week 10 of the fantasy football season.